Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Zara West. Zara West loves all things dark, scary, and heart-stopping as long as they lead to true love. Born in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Zara spends winters in New York where the streets hum with life, summers in the Maritimes where the sea can be cruel, and the rest of the year anywhere inspiration for tales of suspense, murder, and romance are plentiful. In a life full of misadventure, she has had sunstroke on the top of a Greek mountain, been partially trampled by a herd of 400 sheep, and while she has never been kidnapped, she has been marooned on an uninhabited island in the middle of the Canadian wilderness for longer than she wants to remember. When not chasing after Greek shepherds or strolling along sand beaches searching for sea glass, Zara tends her organic herb garden, collects hats and cats, and whips up ethnic dishes for friends and family. Welcome, Zara. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your novel, Concealed by the Tide.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. I think you've covered the romantic suspense side of my life, and I want to talk today about the first book in my new romantic suspense series called Concealed by the Tide. And this book is set in Nova Scotia. And the reason I chose Nova Scotia is because it's a place that I love, and it has lots of wonderful memories for me because when I started going with my husband, his family's been going to Nova Scotia for a very long time, and they have a cottage there. And so we went up there for our honeymoon. We spent our honeymoon in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And then but we had a farm, so we couldn't go very often for many, many years. But when I retired, we also retired from the sheep. We had a sheep farm, 400 sheep. When we retired, we bought a cottage of our own. So we have a cottage on the Atlantic Ocean, on a peninsula. It's very isolated and beautiful, absolutely beautiful place. It's where I go to write. And that's where I'm writing the third book in that series right now.
Oh, wow. You're in Nova Scotia right now?
Well, actually, no, we just got back, but
Okay.
well, I could be in Nova Scotia writing because life is rather hectic here.
True. I've been to Nova Scotia once, and it is beautiful. Also very cold, and also very like just rocky and but beautiful. Just
Yes.
just
We have a 5-mile sand beach with nobody on it.
5 miles. Wow, that's incredible. So you did mention that your Tide Harbor series is set in Nova Scotia, and the
Yes.
question was going to be, why did you set it there? Is there anything in particular about that setting that plays into your romantic suspense or the mystery
Oh,
aspect?
definitely, yes. I actually created a composite imaginary town made up of several places that I have been in Nova Scotia and lived because I wanted to have a place with tides. Remember, the name is Tide Harbor. So the village is set in a place called the Minas Basin, which has the highest tides in the world.
Hmm.
And so when you have tides that are that high, I mean, when you look out in the harbor, when the tide's out, all the boats are sitting on the bottom on the sand. So that's how far the tides go out. And they have these cliffs so that, when the tide's out, you can walk at the foot of the cliffs, but when the tide's in, the water's up to the top of the cliffs. So that gives a lot of opportunities for all kinds of suspenseful and accidents and so on. And I like to torture my characters. So the tides are an important part of the story in each one.
Okay. Do you draw inspiration from real people or events when creating your characters?
That's what's interesting about Concealed by the Tide, because I was walking on my 5-mile sand beach, and I said, doesn't really have very many people on it. And there happened to be a young couple. And, when you're the only, people on the beach, you say hello, right? And so we said hello. And the woman had a Scottish accent. And I asked her, well, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Orkney. And that was interesting because my sister lives in Orkney. And we talked to them, and she had met her husband in Orkney, and they had actually been in my sister's shop. Small world, okay, on an isolated beach in Nova Scotia. He was from Nova Scotia, and he had gone to Orkney to learn about tidal turbines. And so here he was, come back. He was going to go to the Minas Basin and work on the tidal turbines. And guess what? The topic of Concealed by the Tide is. It's all about the environmental effects of tidal turbines that have been installed in the Minas Basin. So yes, it was definitely based on real people.
And did you get information from him, or it was just like, oh, intriguing what he said, and then you went off and researched?
We talked more about his background, so I kind of used his background as for the hero of my story. I did not I made the woman come from New York City because I wanted that tie-in with New York. That's where I'm really from, as you can probably tell by my accent. I have a Brooklyn accent. So I used the characters more than the actual information because right after I got the idea, there was all kinds of controversy. The local fishermen didn't want the tidal turbines. The tidal turbines weren't working right. And so I had all these great news articles that I could build a suspense over. So what happens in Concealed by the Tide, it starts out with someone trying to bomb the turbine.
Okay, and we're going right into my next question with how do you incorporate current social issues or trends into your romance novel without overshadowing the romance itself?
Well, these are romantic suspenses. So that means that there's actually two plots. There's the romance plot, and there is the suspense plot. And so each of the Tide Harbor series is all about environmental issues. So the suspense part has to do with, well, in this case, the people who are against the turbine, who are trying to bomb it, leading rather dangerous protests, trying to sink boats and that kind of thing to prevent this turbine from being put in. And the love story is about a marine biologist who is actually secretly trying to find the bomber, and this New York City woman who is working for an environmental who's come up to organize the people who really don't need an outsider organizing them. So there's a lot of tension between the locals and this woman and this marine biologist, who they're all, those around not from the area. And so I tied it together by having those two outsiders kind of coming together and forming the romantic part of the story.
Okay. Okay. What do you find most rewarding about writing romance novels?
I like getting the finished book. I like opening the box and taking out that book and saying, usually I don't even remember writing it. It's like a whole new book that appeared, and yet I wrote it. It's always an amazing feeling that I can actually produce a finished book, and especially fiction, because I had to work really hard to write fiction.
Um, I'm gonna go with what you just said. So writing nonfiction comes a lot easier than writing fiction for you.
Well, I started by writing nonfiction. I wrote a lot of academic articles and also a lot of how-to articles. I did ethnographic field work in Greece, and I worked with Greek weavers and spinners and weavers. And when I came back to the United States, I was asked to speak all over the country about my research. And I discovered that there was this big interest, so I wrote many articles about weaving and how to weave, so how-to books. And then I was asked to write textbooks, which are also kind of how-to books. So I did a lot of that kind of writing. And so when I came to writing fiction, that's a whole different thing altogether.
And what do you hope, so for your novels, what do you hope your reader feels or experiences when they read them?
Well, I hope that the Tide Harbor series, and actually I have another series I wrote earlier, the Skin series. These are designed to be fast-paced reads. You can sit down and probably read these. You really get into it in a day. Um, they're page turners. They're exciting. They're fun. There's always some funny character or something uh, that makes you laugh. I have children. I like to feature children. So, in Concealed by the Tide, the child has autism, and the a woman shows up on the marine biologist's door, and she turns out to be a Mary Poppins. She can deal with the child, and she teaches him how to deal with his daughter. I worked a lot with autistic children, so I thought that that added a different element. And she loves the little girl loves the heroine because the heroine has a green sweater and reminds her of Kermit the Frog.
Okay. Um, so can you share any personal experiences or anecdotes that influenced your writing?
A lot of things have influenced my writing because I think you have to write not just what you like, but uh, what's popular for readers, what people like to read. Because I mean, I can write what I want for myself, but if I want other people to read it, I can't just do that. So I am influenced a lot by the romances and the romantic suspenses that I have read, and I try to model my books on the ones I think are successful. And I also um, look at people I know and experience I've had. Like I said, this book has an autistic child. The other book has a 6 year old, and right now I have a 5 year old granddaughter, so I modeled it on her. So yes, but people I know are in the books, and also I don't know places. Places.
Um, so what is your writing process? So from the original idea to the finished manuscript.
Oh, I am a plotter, and I have a very organized system which I've developed over time. Um, I start with an idea, usually, as I said, either through people I know or a news article. Then I take that idea and I research the setting. The setting to me is a key element. I always like to do something in a place that's not familiar, that you get to know somewhere new. So my first series was set in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, but it featured graffiti artists and fine artists, and it was the contrast between the fine artists and the graffiti artists. This book, the setting, I've been very pleased. The Nova Scotians who've read the book say it feels like Nova Scotia. So I think I've captured the setting. So I work hard on that. I do a lot of research on setting. And then I develop the characters. And I do a lot of work on characters. Once I have setting and characters, I use very organized romance plot line. I fill it in, and then I sit down and I fast draft. And that means I type as fast as I can without stopping. I don't read. I don't do anything else but write that book. I mean, I don't do it all day long, but I don't do anything else related to writing except draft the book. And I can do that in about a month. So I have the whole book written in a month, but it's like it flows out and it's all organized together. And it has a thing that, because I should say, my first novel took me 7 years and it doesn't flow. Okay. So
Okay.
I learned that you just have to sit and write it. And then you have something to go back and fix. And I love the revision process. I love going back and making the prose better. I love going back and maybe adding a character or taking a character out. I actually like that process. And then there's all these wonderful new AI editors out there that can edit your book for you, but I actually have a real person who lives in Philadelphia and does an absolute amazing job for me. And I also have fantastic critique who reads through the book as well.
So I was ask what craft elements do you think are your strong suit and what would you like to be better at?
I think that my best craft element is language. I'm I like to write flowing, um, visual, strong imagery, sensory writing. In fact, I do a lot of teaching or teach writing, and I have a workshop called Writing with Flash, which is all about using sensory words and and the senses to make your writing come alive. And the hardest part for me is, and this is a critique I've had of my books, is that balancing dialogue with inner thought. I tend to put in too much inner thought.
Okay.
Okay, and but that that to me is you're inside the character's head, and that's what comes out when you're writing. But actually, readers prefer um, characters that are talking to each other and interacting with each other, and they like action too.
Um, how do you approach character development? Do your characters ever surprise you as you're writing or revise?
I Yes, I do extensive planning. I do a lot of extensive character profile. I go find photos of what I think the characters look like, so I have a visual of them. But even if you have everything planned out, when you're writing and you're in the flow, sometimes that character just starts talking about something you weren't planning. They go in a different direction, or you may have planned for them to say, "Oh, I had this happen in Concealed by the Tide. I had planned for the character to be to have a fight in a kayak the other with the villain, and she just didn't want to do that. So instead, I had her fall overboard, and so it seemed it wasn't what I planned, but it actually seemed to be more like what that character would do. I didn't think she would really attack somebody.
Okay. Okay. Over the years, how have you developed as a writer?
Well, that's a long story because, as I said, my first novel took me 7 years because I thought you could just go from writing textbooks and academic articles to writing a novel. They are totally different and totally different way of writing. Um, for example, writing dialogue. I had not written very much dialogue. So I took, I wrote a novel, but it took like 7 years of courses. I took writing courses, lots and lots of writing courses. In fact, I took most of them. You know, Savvy Authors. It's a Savvy author. It's a a group that offers writing courses, and I
Okay.
took most of my original courses there. And they support you and they provide encouragement. And what I love is that I now teach courses for savvy authors.
Good to know. Well, thank you for that. Um,
So it's a kind of a circle. I started there and so on. And then the other thing that helped me is I did a lot of national writing, a novel writing month. I did it 7 years worth, and that helped me write faster.
the NaNoWriMo.
Yes.
Okay. Um, what was your publishing journey? What was your I'm going to ask, first fiction book that was published?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start a little before that. Okay. So my first fiction novel was inspired by my house. My house was built in 1863 and 4 when farmers were doing very, very well. And it's a beautiful house. It's a 5-bedroom house with 12-foot ceilings, huge stone foundation. We've got a barn that dates back to 1830 on the property, and we have graves from 1830 on the property. And so I just, and there was an old homestead, obviously, and this was built thing. So I decided I would write the story of how I imagined the house was built. And I wrote a book called The House Carpenter, set during the Civil War, where the woman was here on the farm, and the soldier was in the army, and he was in the Union Army, and he fought in all the major battles, Gettysburg, and he was in the New York 32nd, which actually went all the way from it fought at Gettysburg and then went all the way, did the March to the Sea, came up and ended up in Washington, D.C. And it was all local men from this area. And I wrote this book with the two stories going back and forth. And I had shared it with my friends who loved it. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to take it and pitch it. So I went to New York City to a pitch festival, and I actually pitched the book to Macmillan, to Penguin, to Kensington, to all the major publishers. And you know what they all said to me? They said, you can't sell a book set in the North about the Civil War. Only half the people will buy the book. So they would not even look at the book. They said, a book set in the South, everybody will buy. So if you look like March, bestseller March, where's it set? In the South.
It is?
It's set in the South. So, even though it was based on Little Women, because that's what they told me, that you could not. So they said to me, why don't you pick a real person who's in your book? Because then it doesn't matter whether it's North or South. And that's how I went on to write my first historical fiction book, which was called That Dickinson Girl. So this is the other side of my writing. Besides romantic suspense, I write historical fiction. And Anna Dickinson was the most popular woman in the United States during the American Civil War. She was an orator, and she was the first woman hired by the Republicans to campaign for Lincoln and when he ran for a second term. She was also the first woman to address Congress. She actually made them pay to attend her lecture, and then she donated the money to the Freedmen's Society in Washington. And this is her story, and she was a very interesting woman, very close friend of Susan B. Anthony.
That's wonderful.
That was my first historical fiction novel, but my very first suspense was this one, and it's called Beneath the Skin. And I did this because I was having trouble selling historical fiction to a publisher. So I wrote a romantic suspense. I pitched it to an editor, and it was immediately picked up. And so it was published by Wild Rose, who went on to publish all 4 books in the series.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So your publishing journey in fiction was who published That Dickinson Girl?
Well, actually, I went to self-publishing.
Okay.
Because right now I think that is a better way to go. And it's a lot easier than it used to be.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's worked very well for me. I've been very happy with the way the books came out and with the responses. So this is the second book, Censored Angel, and I have a third one coming, which is the story of Vinnie Ream, who was an American sculptor.
For your novels, what role do beta readers or editors play in your writing process?
Well, I have a wonderful critique group from it's romance writers called From the Heart, romance writers groups. That critique group, I've been in a lot of critique groups, but that one is marvelous because they read quickly. So in some groups, it's very slow process, but everyone's an avid reader. They read quickly. They really give you excellent feedback, and they're friends. Some of them I've been working with now since I started writing. So we have a real relationship. We've read each other's work. And then I have a editor that I work with. I know there's a lot of AI editors out there, but they're not perfect. In fact, you actually have to know a lot in order to know whether they're right or not. So it's easy. It's actually easy to work with a real person.
Yes, that would make sense. Yes, you have to check up on the AI work. I mean, that's not helpful.
Right at all. I mean, my job was pretty good because I wrote a lot. I've written a lot of academic and textbook work, which it has to be pretty clean. And my husband is very, very finicky about that. So I learned his father was an English professor.
Oh, oh yes. Um, so how do you stay motivated and committed to a project, especially during the revision editing stages?
I love all the stages of writing. I like every part of it. So, so the motivation is finishing the book and seeing the book actually a real book and seeing people read the book and telling me about how they enjoyed it. To me, that is the best thing. I'm reading, positive reviews gives you such a good feeling because you know that you've written something that also touches other people.
And how important was it for you to join a writers group or have critique partners?
I talked a little bit about my critique group. Finding a good critique group is very, very hard. That I know because I really worked hard looking around and trying to find. You have to have people who write similar works. I think that's important. And the group I'm in, there's a lot of people who write romance suspense, and also historical fiction. So I have people who read all the different writing that I do. So that's important. But the writing groups have been very important from the beginning. Even before I was writing fiction, I joined a local writing group, was a romance group. It's called Southern Tier Authors of Romance. It's in right on the borderline with Pennsylvania, so we have members in Pennsylvania and New York. Uh, and that was fun because I went to, they have writing retreats and dinners, and then we get together and just have a good time. It's a small group, but almost everybody's published in it, so that's really cool
That is
for such a
cool.
small group. And so I enjoy that. And then I belong to a lot of online groups. I belong to New Jersey Romance Writers. I've been with them a long time. I belong to Contemporary Romance Writers and Hearts Through History, which is the historical fiction one. Um, I'm in a lot of groups. I'm a joiner. And also I teach. I teach a lot of courses to the romance groups.
Um, so what advice would you give a new writer that's just starting out?
Well, when you're first starting out, the most important thing is to devote time to the writing. It's so easy when you're starting to start and then let it go. But what I found is you have to do it every day. And I actually write every single day. I don't really take any days off. But you don't need to give a lot of time, even if it's a half an hour. If every day you decide I want to write some novel, you devote half an hour or 45 minutes even to something to do with writing that novel. It could be taking a course, it could be working on the novel. Um, I do think you should take lots of writing courses, and you can never take too many. Every teacher has a different approach, and you may find one course with the same topic with a different teacher, and you may learn one thing from one and something else from the other one. I'm a firm believer in you can that learning should never stop. You should always keep learning. I always, it's a joke with my family. I said I could teach anything, and they always laugh at me. But I have taught almost anything because I would go out and teach myself, whatever it was. So I've taught advanced math, I've taught technology, I've taught art, I've taught English and reading. What else have I taught? Anthropology. I mean, I've taught so many different things. Weaving, I've taught lots and lots of weaving courses. And dyeing, natural dyeing and spinning, I took teach courses in that. So you can see, quite a lot.
That is a lot. Oh, what quite a career with in teaching. Uh,
So that's why I should say I have written a series called Write for Success. These are really good sellers, nice little thin books that tell you this is how to write fast, get that creative flow out that I was talking about. And I had to revise your draft, which makes revising your draft lots easier. So that's maybe why I like it
oh,
because it's step by step. Remember, I'm good at how-to books, so they're all step by step.
Oh,
bullet
that's
points
great.
and numbers.
Well, we've come to my final question, and I always like to kind of ask something related to the book, but a slightly, of interest. What was the most interesting fact that you've learned doing your research for your novels?
You're going to love this fact. The fact is, I discovered that my local library, public library, on the second floor, in fact, the entire second floor, is devoted to local history.
Okay.
Yes, that was the most amazing thing. I'd never been upstairs, never had a reason to go up, and I had a question. The library said, well, go upstairs. And it was full of documents and photographs and everything that's been collected locally about the area. And I was actually able to find a reference to my house.
Oh,
It's called John Fuller's Fine Frame House.
okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Historical collections in libraries very popular. Um, the whole second floor, that's pretty impressive. I have to be honest.
Yes,
And have you gone back to use it?
to me.
Have you gone back to use it? Do you think it might inspire a new story for you?
That definitely could. I would like to actually go back to my original first novel, which was the story of how my house was built, and revise that and publish it myself because I don't. If only people in North buy it, that's fine by me.
Well, I mean, of course, you could publish it yourself now, and then
That's
maybe you'll
right.
get your own audience, and the publishers will be all wrong.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Zara, for being here today, and we wish you all the best of luck with the Tide Harbor series, and that you mentioned that there's a third one on the horizon, and your other book about the Reams book, the historical fiction book.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you.